The author mentions that English literature was not part of any academic curriculum in the early 19th century in order to. This is a reference to the very first statement of the passage. At the time Jane Austen's novels were published between 1811 and 1818, that relates to the early 19th century. English literature was not part of any academic curriculum. In addition, fiction was under strenuous attack. Certain religious and political groups felt novels had the power to make so-called immoral characters so interesting that young readers would identify with them. These groups also consider novels to be of little practical use. Even Coleridge, certainly no literary reactionary, spoke for many when he asserted that novel reading occasions the destruction of the mind's power. The reason for this is given at the beginning of the second paragraph. These attitudes towards novels help explain why Austen received little attention from early 19th century literary critics. So the reason why the author mentions this aspect and all the arguments made in the first paragraph is because the author wishes to signify or suggest to us why Jane Austen did not receive much attention from early 19th century literary critics. So let's look at the options. A says, emphasize the need for Jane Austen to create ordinary, everyday characters in her novels. Now, this is an argument which is very far removed from this particular reference. We see this argument in the last paragraph. Praising her verisimilitude, Lewes added that nonetheless her focus was too often upon only the unlofty and the commonplace. 20th century Marxists, on the other hand, were to complain about what they saw as her exclusive emphasis on a lofty upper middle class. So if there was any emphasis on the need for Jane Austen to create ordinary, everyday characters in her novels, that opinion would be shared by, or would be the opinion of, these 20th century Marxists, not that of anything related to the first paragraph, not that of literary critics in the 19th century, early 19th century, that is. So A is irrelevant. We can eliminate it. Option B says, give support to those religious and political groups that had attacked fiction. We've already seen the reference. The reference is here. That said, we see that this is highly unlikely. It is quite unlikely that the author is looking to support the argument of these religious and political groups. While the author does not show any kind of favoritism or favor towards Jane Austen, towards literature as a whole, the author's tone throughout the passage is somewhat detached and more explanatory. It is unlikely that the author would try to support any one group which is an extremist group or which has extreme opinions. And these religious and political groups, they did have extreme opinions. They had a very negative opinion of novels. So B does not seem likely at all. Option C tells us, give one reason why Jane Austen's novel received little critical attention in the early 19th century. Exactly what we needed. This is the argument made in the first statement of the second paragraph. There was very little critical attention given to Jane Austen's novels in early 19th century, and that is because of these attitudes towards novels. So the reasoning for the use of this particular phrase is given by this answer option. We can qualify C. Option D says, suggest the superiority of an informal and unsystematized approach to the study of literature. This has not been discussed in the passage. We are not talking about an informal, unsystematized approach anywhere. There's no reference to it. There's no reference where we can even infer this from. So this is completely outside the premise. D can be eliminated. The correct answer is option C.